So the fact that my previous video was on a Jeep is not lost on me, but the car I'd planned to show you today is not done, so I'll be instead showing you this one. This is a Lesney Matchbox number 71 Jeep Gladiator, produced around 1964. This is a pretty popular model and will cost you a little bit more than most Matchbox cars due to supply and demand. This one costs around $10 if my notes are correct. A near mint example can cost upwards to $90 to $100, especially if it comes with the box. There's only one major variation. Some models have a green interior. These are a bit more rare and cost a little bit more, but not overly expensive. At the time of this video, there were several green versions being sold on eBay. I sort of wondered where Lesney came up with this color, and then to my surprise, a picture of this exact model and color came up when I was researching the truck on Wikipedia. Go figure. Taking this truck apart proved to be a little bit difficult as the posts Lesney used were extremely short and I didn't want to drill through the bed. Once I did get the base off, I discovered I was not the first inside, as some spider had taken up residence in the past and left an egg sac behind. Luckily for me it was empty, though I'm sure that would have made for some good YouTube footage if I had opened it and hundreds of spiders came pouring out. The inside glass is also held in place by another small post that will need to be drilled out. These can be really tricky as one false move or mistake can shatter the plastic. Worse, this plastic already has some small cracks in it, so the odds of making them bigger is high. However, I was able to remove the windshield without breaking it, though I did have to take out one of the opening doors to allow the windshield room to be removed. The axles on this truck are in good shape and are a bit long, so I can reuse them. So to remove them, I'll use Marty's method of grinding off the mushroom while spinning the axle with a Dremel. This method works really well if the axles spin, so thanks for him for the idea. Now that the wheels are off, I can use the aircraft paint stripper to remove the remaining paint that was not removed by play. This involves spraying the truck down and letting it sit for about 5 minutes and then using a brush to wipe away the paint. There's always some stubborn paint that remains in the corners and in the creases, and this is removed with a pick. If it's really stubborn, I can reapply some of the stripper and use a brush to brush it into the areas that still have paint. But normally one application is all I need. In areas with a high amount of detail, I like to use a brass brush to go over and remove any leftover paint or light oxidation. I'll also go over the entire body with some 4/0 steel wool to remove paint residue and any light oxidation on the areas that were exposed to air. It's sort of curious though, most of the Matchbox vehicles were made years before Mattel made Hot Wheels, but they tend not to be as nearly as oxidized as Hot Wheels or even later Matchbox cars made during the Superfast era. Obviously, something must have changed in their metal alloy between these two eras. Since I have the steel wool out, I'll go ahead and clean up the metal band Lesney uses as a spring to hold the doors in place. Sort of strange to think that this spring has been under tension for 54 years and is still holding strong. From what I've read, some of these trucks use this metal spring and some use a piece of plastic in its place. Plastic can get brittle with age and metal can rust, so it would be interesting to know which ones are holding up the best over time. If you own one of these, take a look and then let me know below if it's a metal or plastic spring. With all the prep work done on the truck, I can go ahead and spray a coat of primer and set it aside to dry. While I wait, I'll turn my attention to the axles that have a small amount of rust on them. To remove the rust, I'll drop them into some hydrogen peroxide and let them soak for a couple hours. While that's going on, I'll go ahead and remove the paint from the base using the same techniques you just saw used on the body. After that is done, I can check on my primer to see that it is dry so I can start mixing up my paint. I plan to use the paint on this truck as the color I want to match. The color of this truck is what I would call an orange-red. I am sure there's an official name for the color since they obviously used it on an actual vehicle. To get to the orange-red color, I'll add small amounts of yellow to the red and mix well. I will then use a hairdryer to dry the paint on the stir stick and then check it against the paint I wish to match. If I didn't have the spare truck, I would need to do this step before I remove the paint. In that case, I usually just paint small patches next to the original paint and dry to see how close I am. As I get closer, I start adding the yellow a drop at a time. The drying can get old, but usually I can get to the color or really close to the color in about 3 to 4 tries. Once I have the color dialed in, I can go about airbrushing it on the body. Normally the paint needs a little bit of acrylic thinners to go through my 0.3mm airbrush nozzle. You may not have to do this if you're using a 0.5 nozzle, which are very common. The first coat is a simple tack coat, with the second being a heavier coat, and then I do the third with the doors off. Once I'm done, I'll set the body aside to dry and then clean my airbrush and add in black primer to paint the base. The base is done exactly the same as the body with just 2 coats. While that dries, I'll take a look at the windshield. As I mentioned before, there's 2 small cracks in the center, and really there's not much I can do about those other than to try to get the plastic as clean and as clear as possible to make the cracks difficult to see. I'll start by using some 400 grit sandpaper to sand the front windshield. This is a pretty thick and extremely hard plastic, so I feel comfortable removing quite a bit of material. Once I'm confident that I have removed enough, I'll switch over to some 1000 grit sandpaper and wet sand the plastic until I remove all the 400 grit scratches. I find that you can make big jumps in sandpaper grits like this when you're sanding plastic. If this was metal, I would do some in-between grits, as it would take forever to remove the 400 grit lines with 1000 grit paper. And just like the difference in grits, I'll move from 1000 grit paper to polishing with rubbing compound to remove the 1000 grit scratches. Here I'm able to make this jump because of my using a power tool to do the work. If I had to do this by hand, I would do something different. The internal plastic is pretty dirty, no doubt because it used to house a spider. I'll clean it up by using a toothbrush and some dishwashing soap. This one actually took a few minutes to clean, as much of the, whatever it was hard to get off, but eventually I did get it cleaned up. The axles have been soaking for some time now, and all the rust has been removed. I'll pull them out and dry them off. Both have a small amount of discoloration due to them rubbing against the body all these years. I decided to leave that, as it's normal for axles to look this way. But if you wanted to get rid of it, some metal polish and a Dremel would make quick work of it. So at this point the body has had about 24 hours to dry, and here I am comparing it to the original truck. The color is close, however I find that the new paint is brighter compared to the muted color of the original. Now I could have added some black to the paint and muted the color a little bit, getting closer to the original. However, these cars don't always match from car to car, and I'm going to guess that this original car color has dulled over the years. Or at least that's what I'm going to be telling myself, as I like the brightness of the new color compared to the dullness of the old. It does make it look nice and new. One mistake I made here was to jump right into the clear coating without lightly sanding the body. I thought my paint job was good, but after clear coating I found out I had 2 small issues on the hood that, had I lightly sanded the paint, it would have removed the problems. They're not major or really all that noticeable unless you're looking at the car with a magnifying glass or zoomed in with a camera like you'll get to see later, but I wish I had removed them all the same. Here's how the body looked after the clear urethane cured. See if you can spot the issues I mentioned, and then let me know below. You guys don't really catch things I don't even see until you point them out in the comments, so I'll be interested to see if you catch them. So now it's time to put the wheels and axles back on the car. Marty uses a drill press to do this. I use a lathe, as it gives me more control than I get out of my drill press. Mushrooming the ends of these 2 metal rods is pretty simple, as I place the axle between 2 centers and then use the tailstock to apply pressure to the axle while the head is spinning. I like to apply and then release the pressure over and over. This seems to give the best results for me compared to a constant pressure. Moving on to the grille and headlights, I need to find a silver paint that comes close to matching the one Lesney used. And despite trying out dozens of options over the years, the one I think looks the best is the silver Sharpie. It is again slightly brighter or shinier, but it's so close it's almost indistinguishable. The best part is that I can use solvents like lighter fluid to remove it if I mess up without harming the clear coat. This is a huge advantage, as I can keep repeating it over and over until I get it just right. So after adding in the front grille details, it's time to put the car back together. Unlike most cars, this is a bit of a trick due to aligning all the parts for the opening doors. Up to this point, the doors have been held in place due to the spring putting tension on them. However, it's the interior plastic that locks them in place and keeps them from being removed. I'm not sure who designed this setup, but I have to say I have never seen one of these with a missing door. The base can be glued on, however I found that it snapped into the remaining post and was held firmly. This will work for me, as it will be going straight into my display case, but if I wanted it to be more robust, I could add a small amount of glue between the base and the body to hold it. So my goal for this Jeep was a restoration, to get it back to its like-new condition. Really, other than the small cracks in the windshield, I think I was able to accomplish this. But as always, you guys are the arbiters of how close I got. I want to note that I did a couple things in order to replicate the paint of the original, not just for the color, but the texture. Lesney used large spray booths that would paint several cars as they went down the assembly line. They would then go into an oven to bake the paint and cure it. As such, the paint on these cars is nice, but very seldom perfect. To replicate this, I did not sand between the acrylic and the urethane, and I got the result I wanted other than the two small issues previously mentioned. So in the future, I'll be sure to very lightly sand just to be sure I get any dust off the paint. But overall, I like the texture I got, and will have the two trucks side by side later for you to compare yourself. Last, I always get comments as to why I didn't do the taillights or painting the Jeep name on the tailgate and things like that. And the answer is Lesney didn't do that, and this is a restoration, not a custom. Restoration is sort of a nice way of saying forgery. I'm attempting to make a forgery of this Jeep Gladiator, and if I added to it, people would immediately recognize it as a forgery. You of course have the luxury of knowing I'm making a forgery as you're watching the process. What I'm hoping for is that if this car was between several other identical original cars, you would not be able to pick it out. The same as the Mustang Stalker a few videos before. Many people said that they could pick that car out for different reasons, but most said that they could pick it out because it looked nicer than the cars around it. Which is nice of you to say, but tells me I failed at my goal. So for this truck, I'm adding in small flaws to get around the mistakes I made on the Mustang. But hey, I'm interested in your thoughts, so let me know below. And as always, thanks for watching.